WRR is actually the Office of Cultural Affairs radio station, and that means that it's the City of Dallas's radio station. And I guess about maybe a few months ago, we had some discussions about new ideas that WRR was exploring as far as programming was concerned. And one of the things that I raised at a staff meeting was the fact that I was always complaining that jazz was not included in this classical music format, because in fact jazz is America's classical music. And the new station manager, Mike Oakes, said, I agree. And so I was delighted when he said that. And so we started talking about the possibility of a show being done, because they couldn't find one that was syndicated that they could purchase. And so they thought, well, guess we're going to have to do something ourselves. And that's when we started talking very seriously about the idea of me coming up with a show that would highlight jazz. There are many different genres of jazz, and what I'm looking at is classical jazz, which are going to be mostly standards. Many of the jazz musicians that many people know, but that have not necessarily heard a lot of the music that they've composed. Or I'm also going to be looking at highlighting those jazz musicians in Dallas area who compose jazz and who play jazz. So one of the shows per month will be a live jazz performance, and we'll have musicians in the studio, preferably those who are composers, but not exclusively. And we will have their music showcased as well. So that's going to happen once a month at the end of the month. Each month will be themed, so that we are looking at all different ways in which jazz has affected the music world of America. For instance, in July, we're going to look at jazz at the movies, which is a lot of the music scores for films that were, quote, edgy, oftentimes used jazz as the basis for those scores. We're going to examine some of those and listen to some of the music of those. We have composers like Duke Ellington, Chico Hamilton, Elmer Bernstein, lots of Herbie Hancock. Lots of good musicians have contributed to that movie world. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at women in jazz. We're going to look at the history of jazz, and all of that will follow along with the months. So for instance, in January, what I plan to do is take a look in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King at jazz musicians who've done work around the civil rights movement. People like Max Roach and Abbey Lincoln and John Coltrane all have done work that was specifically addressing the strife and what have you that was happening at the time in the 1960s and 70s. So those are the kinds of things that I hope to do with the show, is to not just let us hear some fabulous music, because we are going to hear some fabulous music, but to also give us a sense of the way in which jazz has been a major part of the fiber of American culture, and to understand how these musicians and their music has had an impact on the history and culture of America. Well, one of the reasons why I'm very interested in having our audience hear from the jazz musicians who are right here in the North Texas area, and in Dallas in particular, is because Dallas has played a major role in the history of jazz in America. We have some extremely important musicians who have come from right here in South Dallas. Cedar Walton, we've had James Clay, we've had Marshall Ivory. I mean, there are all these musicians who are who were on the national scene. People like Ornette Coleman from Ft.Worth made a major impact internationally. We're not even just talking locally or nationally. We're talking internationally. These artists have had a major impact on the music world. And many people don't know that. There's always this conversation that I hear from people about, oh, there's no jazz in Dallas. Well, you may not be supporting it, but there certainly is a lot of it. And when I moved here in 1980, the one thing that I was concerned about coming from the East Coast was I going to miss the jazz that I always was used to hearing? And I can say without any hesitation that I have not been in any way disappointed by the jazz that I've encountered here and the musicians that I've had the honor to meet and to support, because the music is fantastic. And I think that Dallas needs to be more aware and more supportive of that music. I'm thrilled that WRR has picked up this show because Chamber Music of America some years ago, included jazz in its offerings for the chamber music community. And the idea that jazz is a classical music form is one that a lot of people are not ready for, but it's the one that we've been talking about for many years, those of us in the arts world. And finally, several years ago, Chamber Music of America said, yes, jazz in fact is a classical music form, and we're going to support it. So they have included it in their programming, in the grants that they offer musicians in terms of, they commission original music from musicians. And for WRR to take on this show, it shows that we're in the forefront as well of the music community that's saying, yes, jazz is a classical music form. So I'm hoping that jazz fans out here in the North Texas area who are in the WRR listening audience will tune in on Sundays at 7 p.m. and listen to Jazz at Fair Park. I mean, you're going to hear some people you know, but you're also going to be exposed to some people you may not know. And I'm excited about the whole idea of having jazz become a regular staple in the Classical 101.1 FM musical offerings. So you can go online. If you can't listen to it on the radio, you can go online and listen to it live streamed. Or you can listen to the podcast if you miss a show. There's going to be podcast on the website. So you can go back to the website and listen to the podcast that I have done of a previous show. You can go all the way back to the beginning if you missed that and you're just tuning in the middle of a show. So I'm hoping that all of you people who are jazz fans and some of you who may not be will take a listen and hopefully support Jazz at Fair Park.
Mm-hmm.